Welcome back to Barrel Age Faith. I just wanted to hop on here real quick. I wanted to share an article that I wrote this week called "Meeting the Lord of the Woods," and in this, I kind of describe a little bit of my own spiritual journey. I know this last week I announced that I was uh, becoming Orthodox from Roman Catholicism, and really received all sorts of feedback. And really, I needed to take it like a step back, and I really wanted to sort of pray through and explore, man, where has God brought me to this point? And so in this article, you can find it on barrelagefaith.com. I really wanted to share just like a little brief sort of uh, part of my story. And really it's I wanted to explain it because a lot of people thought that like when I hopped online and shared that as if I was going to like immediately be some type of like online debater or like immediately going to be this apologist coming out of the gate and just like trying to destroy the Vatican I papacy or something like that. And really, that's not me. And that's what this article is all about. So I just want to share a little bit of this article with you on barrelagefaith.com. You can find it on the main page. And I'm just going to read it to you today, what I wrote. And this is my story. And a lot of it has to do with how do you deal with the anxiety of dealing with so much information that's online, and many of us have been dealing with this since maybe even we were teenagers or kids. And this can lead to anxiety about what religion do I believe in? Do I be an atheist or a theist? Uh, am I, a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian? What kind of Christian should I be? Protestant, Catholic, or Orthodox? And all these types of questions can lead to anxiety. And that's why we have to get off of our computer screens and pray. We have to meet the Lord of the woods, and not just in the woods, of course, the Lord of the sacraments and the altar, the Lord um, of our church. But I have always found the woods to be a special place for me to pray with the Lord. So I wanted to share a little bit of my article with you um, today. So again, I am not like an online debater. If anything, I'm much more of like a dad. I have 6 kids, husband of a wonderful wife. I love to garden. I love to cook. I love to be like a storyteller and really like a catechist, teacher of the faith, and really I feel more like a fellow pilgrim than I do some type of like keyboard crusader. And this is important because I enjoy sharing the gospel with people that are strangers to it and telling the gospel in ways that maybe they've never heard or maybe never imagined. And also, describing how Christ pioneered a whole new way of being human for us all. Of course, he's God, but he also pioneered a new way for us to be human. And it's really my own story of doubt that has led for me to be more of a fellow pilgrim and a dialoguer than necessarily a big online debater who's always got his apologist hat on. It was really a prayer time with the Lord in the woods that I began to really like hear his still small voice. Now it begins with me being an evangelical growing up, actually, in a devout home. My mother would study the Bible every single morning. I wake up and see her there on the couch when the sun hadn't even really come up yet. My dad would take us to church 2 to 3 times a week. Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and then maybe something else similar time. We had the pastor over to our house quite a bit. And so I grew up in a home of prayer, scripture study, sharing our faith. Wonderful, beautiful home. My parents were quite sacrificial. It was really in high school, though, as the internet just began exploding with information in the early 2000s, where you could get on chat rooms and blogs and learn about all sorts of, world religions, that I began to question my own faith. I began, being disturbed by my own questions as like a teenager. How do I know that my version of the truth is true? How do I know Christianity is true? How do I know that like Hinduism or atheism is not true? Maybe they're all true. Maybe they're all wrong. Maybe it's somewhere in between. And so I began like studying Hinduism and Buddhism and Judaism and Islam, different forms of Christianity, even Catholicism back then, and atheism. And like many people my age, I began really beginning to get intellectually overwhelmed. It's easy to do, and you look for solutions. Well, maybe I could be like Baha'i, a Baha'i who a religion that tries to sort of synthesize and combine all of them together, or maybe just be an agnostic where you give up. Yeah, there's There could be a God, maybe not, probably is, but there's no way to know him. And that's where many of my friends have ended up. They're, religiously unaffiliated. They're agnostics. They don't know. But no, I'm spiritual, but I don't go to church. I think there's a God, but I'm not really sure. It's where many of these nuns came from, and I can relate to them because I was almost there. I was also almost an atheist, so I've got a soft spot in my heart for atheists, um, because I was almost one of them. But it was in the sense of being overwhelmed that I turned off the computer screen. This is very, very important. Turned off the computer screen, and I went near the woods by my house. And you know what? I'm going to start asking these same questions, but I'm not going to always be like hitting the Google search engine. Well, I think back then it was Ask Jeeves. Remember that for you older millennials? Ask Jeeves. Um, but before there was Google. Anyways, I went to the woods. And that's where I would ask my questions, and my questions to God eventually turned more and more into prayer. Of course, asking God questions is prayer, but prayer also involves surrender. It involves trust. And it was in these woods that I began to return to every day after school or after work, whenever I could find the time. And I would just walk through the woods praying to the Lord. And it's not really like I got like complex theological answers from the Lord when I asked these big questions. But really, it was much more that I received a peace that came from an experience of his presence in the woods that I hadn't quite experienced in other aspects of my life. Yeah, maybe a little bit at church, maybe a little bit of prayer here and there, but it was in those woods being raw with God, raw with my emotions, being transparent, opened up, cut open, cracked open, and surrendering to the Lord. This is so important to the Christian life, to the human life, to be cracked open and transparent with the Lord because our hearts can get so hardened. And we have to ask Him to cultivate and till our hearts up to be ready to receive the seeds of the Word of God in His own presence. And that's, prayer is a type of evidence for God when you experience Him in a way you've never experienced and you receive a peace that overwhelms the anxiety. It gives you a peace that surpasses all understanding. And so it's not the same type of thing of like systematic theology or statements of belief or analyzing church history or, theological squabbles related to the scriptures. Instead, this is an experience of him, of who he is. And this is so, so important. So I walked out of those woods after a couple years knowing, okay, I'm ready to serve him. And I still cracked open theology books and I still met friends who were also wrestling with the same things because we did want to go deep. It's still important to go deep in theology, but part of being deep in theology is prayer. Prayer is theology, and there is no theologian without being one who prays. Um, I really felt like when I was in this place in the woods, it was like a type of holy silence. You got the birds still chirping, you can hear the sounds of nature, but there is a type of holy silence with our Maker. And this is important because our world's trying to pump in so much noise so that we can't hear what's really going on. The voice of God to us. It's like in order for us to really know God, we've got to turn off all the distractions, all the noise, be laid open before Him, and be like Adam, right? In the cool of the evening, walking with the Lord. The Lord still actually desires that. He doesn't want us to hide from Him. He wants us to be cracked open, transparent, and be there ready to commune with Him, and for us to expose our sins, to expose our weaknesses and wounds. And that's the beginning of the Christian life. Beginning of the Christian life. It's so, so important. I mean, and it's from those woods that I began asking a lot of big questions like, how does creation itself, where I'm experiencing God, fit into reality? How does, the Eastern religions tend to say the created world is a mere illusion. Atheists tend to say that the cosmos is ultimately meaningless. But Christianity is saying that creation is a temple for God. And I'm communing with Him in these woods in a sense. Um, And then you discover when you begin reading the Bible at a much deeper level that not only has the Lord made creation to be His temple, not only is He restoring it, He is ultimately going to renew and renovate this creation and unite heaven and earth together through Christ. And this is the end of the Bible. And it's a beautiful image. I was surprised to find that. I was really getting into looking at the scriptures through this lens of creation and even in environmentalism too. I was really getting into this, but in relation to like Christ. Um, and I began studying scriptures at a deeper level and seeing that the Lord was the wild Lord of the Gospels. He spent a lot of time in creation too, exposing himself to the Father. Of course, he was without sin. He was fully God. But but he spent a lot of time saying, particularly when we see him on the Mount of Olives, right? Asking the Father, "Hey, please take this cup." He's there. He's fully there with the Father. He spends 40 days, of course, in the wild, being tested and challenged and prepared for his ministry. We see him ministering to crowds all day and then needing to go off to be with the Lord in the woods. Multiple instances of this in Jesus' life. I was profoundly changed having an experience, but then seeing in the scriptures that Elijah did this and Moses did this and all the prophets needed to go spend time with the Lord to see his presence with him. And this really left an impression on me. It really left such an impression on me that I was ready to serve him as a missionary. So I went to Taylor University, which is kind of like an evangelical missionary school. It's not just for missions, but many people who many parents who are in the mission field living in their countries, they'll send their kids there. We call them MKs, missionary kids. And it was there that my heart sort of caught on fire to be a missionary for the Lord and be open to being an overseas missionary, sort of going out into the wild and ministering to other people in the rugged places of the world. But I also wanted to combine this with like environmental science, like help people see the Lord, share the gospel, teach them about the Christ of the wild, while also putting in solar panels and digging wells. And so actually at Taylor University, I started out as an environmental science major with theology. Eventually, though, I got so obsessed with theology uh, that I didn't finish my environmental science degree. I just took a few courses, but I got so into studying biblical theology, and then I took Christian educational ministries and got 2 degrees there. And then I also took several courses in world missions. And I was really ready to go do this, but the Lord kind of changed directions on me. I also began while taking these courses in college and then also studying after college to prepare for missions or church planting or whatever he might want from me, whether that be in the States or abroad. I began also studying the missionaries, uh, like St. Paul, the apostle, or St. Patrick of Ireland. I was surprised by how intense their love was for the Lord and how willing they were to like go to the ends of the earth to share the gospel, to the rugged deserts or the wild places. I mean, St. Paul traveled over 10,000 miles, which is pretty phenomenal. It's like I think it's like from like New York to LA and back twice. That's how much St. Paul traveled. Much of it by foot, not entirely, some of it by ship. And we know that St. Patrick, of course, did this as well. And I was so impressed by them because, St. Paul, you read about his deep theology that you read in the scriptures, of course, like the book of Romans. But I was seeing them in my studies and in my writings as I read writings about them that, wow, these guys spent a lot of time in nature with the Lord, and they were ready to go all out to all these places to serve him. And this left a deep impression on me. Part of this connects to my journey though, because I began to realize that like St. Patrick was a bishop and a missionary. And you start to see, and St. Patrick, is one of the few early church saints and fathers that Protestants are aware of, particularly evangelicals. And he sort of is the door that opens us up to the early church. And he was like that for me. I began through St. Patrick and the early church studying the early missions. Like, where did they go? Like St. Thomas to India and Peter and Paul throughout, but eventually to Rome. And you can study where all the apostles went throughout the world. But I was really surprised to see that they set up church structure, bishops, presbyters, and deacons, and that the Eucharist was present and baptismal regeneration and all these things that you see in the ancient apostolic churches. I was surprised to find this. And so I sort of stumbled upon it because I wanted to be a missionary. And I wanted to study the best missionaries, and these are the church fathers and the early saints. And so I began also discovering the monks who might just stay put in a cave, but some of them would go out to be missionaries. Saints Cyril and Methodius, who come a little bit later, but they're good models of that, being these monks who went out as missionaries. And, uh, and I was just so impressed with everything that I was finding. And of course, looking at Saint Ignatius of Antioch, who, though he's the bishop of Antioch, does leave to go be martyred in Rome. And I was just fell in love with his pastoral heart for the churches. And this was here. It wasn't my obsession with the early church and ancient apostolic Christianity wasn't looking for institutional Christianity. It wasn't looking for like intellectual disputes. It wasn't looking for uh, Protestant Catholic debates or Protestant Orthodox debates or Catholic Orthodox debates. It was about serving the Lord in missions, and this remains a big part of my heart uh, to this day. But that has always been my approach to the ancient church, and why I'm so passionate about it. It's not stale. It's not expired. It's why I call it the barrel aged faith. It's like still fresh. It still renews. It never expires. It's ageless, though aged. And so eventually I made the decision to leave evangelical Protestantism because I saw the blood of the martyrs, monks living in caves, wild saints who went out to the ends of the earth, and they all seemed to believe in the same thing that Christ had handed down, both in the faith, but also in the church and the sacraments. So I, of course, never became an overseas missionary. As far as I went was the Dominican Republic for like a mission trip. But eventually, God called my wife and I back to where we grew up, and I was just getting started. Before I fully left Protestantism, I did help start like a Protestant church plant off my parents' church. And it was around that time that I resigned to join the Catholic Church. Um, but I also helped start a coffee shop and a tap room to reach out to spiritual seekers in my area. I worked with high risk youth for several years, helping them see Jesus. Uh, uh, and I learned a lot from their brokenness. They actually taught me a lot about Jesus. Um, I always felt like I was learning more about Jesus from them than I was giving to them, but I learned a lot through the abused and neglected of high risk youth. Eventually, I was hired to teach Catholic theology and do youth ministry and be a parish catechetical leader for 6 years at a Catholic church. And it was filled with so many warm memories. I mean, just so many wonderful times filled with the love of Christ and growing closer to people. And so now here I am feeling like, yeah, my journey has kind of been all over the place. But I always go back to the woods um, to pray. And it's there that I draw strength with the Lord. Of course, I also draw strength from the sacraments and through prayer in the church and visiting monasteries and visiting all sorts of places. But there are special places near my home that I love to frequent, and I travel those paths quite frequently, and that's where I'm raw with the Lord still. And I share that with you because people have contacted me and they feel anxious about their own faith. And I've been getting messages like this for years. It's not just because of this moment, but they're overwhelmed with so much information. And really all I do is encourage them to just pray. Spend time with the Lord. You're never gonna get all the academic answers that you want. And one person was quite concerned. What if I make decisions about certain things and then I discover more information? And just with like any decision that you make that's big, prayer, um, walking alongside of other people and seeking their wisdom, asking God to show himself in specific ways. All of these go alongside of study and research to know what God's will is. God's going to show you his will. There's obviously things that we don't do, like sin and do mortal sins and grievous things like that. But when it comes to the really specific details of our lives, and they can all look kind of good, how do you know what's best? How do you know what the Lord desires? And all of those things go into making a decision. So to conclude this article, it doesn't mean that I'll never explain like deeper theological reasons on my journey and why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I want you to always know that I'm really you'll probably never see me ever doing an online debate. Probably never see me treating people in a way that just jumps to conclusions to say, oh, I know what they think. No, I am much more interested in friendship, prayer, dialogue, treating each other as fellow pilgrims, sharing the gospel with strangers, and inviting others into Christian discipleship. Um, and of course, the sacraments are necessary. Holy orders are necessary. The councils, church history, all these things are very important. But we must treat each other with a type of respect and charity and love that runs much deeper than a lot of times we allow to happen online. And so I just want you to know this will be the tone of barrel age faith. Like, this is who I am. I'm a broken person that's sharing my brokenness with you, but the Lord is so good that His grace fills all that brokenness, um, and He allows us to see Him. Uh, he allows us to know Him, which is just truly beautiful to me. And so I hope when you see me online or you read articles, you see me interviewing people, which I got a really fun interview getting ready to come out next week with Michael Jeffries on creation stewardship. Uh, and he's got a great blog called The Good Steward, looking at Christian stewardship and environmental care with C.S. Lewis, J.R. Tolkien, and in the Christian tradition. And so you'll see that interview next week. It was a joy to have him on today. We recorded it, but it'll be out next week. But anyways, I want to share this with you guys. And if you want more articles, you can find it on barrelagefaith.com. I have many articles that I've written over the last year and a half. Um, and that the articles really show what all about, what Barrel Age Faith is all about. And that's just bringing people deeper and deeper into a relationship with Christ via uh, the ancient church and seeing what Christ passed down to us, but also in an active relationship with Him now through prayer and in the living church. So, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys have a blessed weekend, and appreciate all those who have been encouraging to me during this time. I hope that you continue to keep my family in your prayers. All right, guys, God bless. Have an amazing day. Bye bye.